Welcome inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, where Ohio State just held its first of 15 spring practices on Monday morning. Andy, I know you, like me, are excited to be back here watching some football again. What were your biggest takeaways from the day?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first place to start with everything is the quarterbacks, and there's no real pecking order that's been established. I think watching the three of them throw, it was interesting because they did a drill where all of them went side by side by side, Tavian St. Clair, Lincoln Kienholz, and Julian Sayin, and I think just from what caught my eyes standpoint, the first thing that stood out to me was the quickness of Julian Sayin's release. And, this quarterback competition is going to play out, and I don't think we're going to make definitive judgments from the first day of spring practice throwing against air. But just you could tell when the three of them were side by side and they threw the ball at kind of the same time, it got out of Julian's hand just much quicker, and you could see the efficiency in that release. It's just straight up and out the ball is. And, a lot of zip on those throws too, some tight spirals, but in terms of what caught my eye the most, maybe not observationally in terms of depth chart stuff, we didn't find anything out there, but as an observer, I think that was one of the first things that popped out to me.
Yeah, and we did see, we only saw part of a practice, but for part of a practice that we were out here, we saw Lincoln Kienholz take some first-team reps. We saw Julian Sayin take some first-team reps. Tavian St. Clair, of course, his first practice as a Buckeye, or at least his first official practice as a Buckeye, coming in as working with that third-team offense as a freshman, as you'd expect. And so, we expect that competition to be primarily between Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz. We've said it before, Julian feels like the guy to beat in that competition, but it's just starting. Ryan Day certainly not going to make any declarative statements on day one, and so we'll see how that progresses. But we know that release, when you talk about kind of a standout trait for these guys, I think that's certainly Julian's standout trait, that release, and that was on display today. I think in terms of the depth chart, probably the biggest thing that stood out to me was seeing who was running at strong safety with the first-team defense, and that was Malik Hartford. We expect that to be a competition throughout the spring between Malik Hartford and Jalen McLean, but at least for today, at least for the hour that we were at practice, it was Malik taking those first-team reps at safety, and I think that speaks to what we heard from Matt Guerreri a little over a week ago. He said, you're going to see a different Malik Hartford this spring, and again, it's early. Most of what we saw today was either individual drills or, team drills where they weren't necessarily going head-to-head. So I don't think anything today where you're really making any big standout observations about one player standing out more than another. But just to see Malik getting those reps certainly speaks to the fact that, while I had said maybe I thought Jalen McLean was the front runner at strong safety, maybe not. Maybe Malik Hartford is that guy. Although, as Ryan Day talked about it during his press conference after practice, it's clear they're still evaluating things with how they're going to line up that secondary. And, could we see a free safety lineup with both Malik Hartford and Jalen McLean more often? Some of that, I think, is going to depend on how Lorenzo Styles Jr. develops this spring and whether they think he can handle that dual cornerback safety role like they had Jordan Hancock in last year, or if it makes sense to change things up.
Yeah, Day openly pined about that in his press conference of, is Lorenzo a corner? Is he a safety? How exactly does he fit into the defense? And we look at everything Jordan Hancock did last year. I think we've both talked about it could be a mix of guys kind of filling that role and bringing that versatility, or the structure can change. And that's what so much of the conversation surrounding the secondary was. And I wanted to dive into it a little bit more with Day. Unfortunately, didn't get called on this press conference. It happens sometimes, but Tony Gerdeman asked a great question about how basically today the limited practice and reps we saw, they were rolling boundary and field between Caleb and Malik and mixing in those different looks. And so you get the sense it's going to be really fluid with this secondary, exactly how the guys are going to mix in. That's those finer details that are going to be worked out over the course of spring, summer, fall. And one of the more intriguing storylines outside the quarterback battle I'm excited to watch, I think, just to see exactly how this secondary coalesces and what guys get involved. Is Devin Sanchez going to command playing time in year one, which is definitely something Ryan Day left the door open for. Today, it's too early to say that Devin's definitely going to be involved in the game plan right now. But he said if guys deserve to play, they're going to play, and they seem willing to move around pieces in that secondary as needed to get their best alignments. Speaking of guys moving around, Austin Siereveld, we saw him working at left tackle with the first team offensive line today. Made sense, especially when you heard Day talk about afterward. They aren't starting their transfers with the first groups right now. They're kind of holding those guys back a little bit, letting them settle in. So Ethan Onyanwa and Philip Daniels weren't involved there. You have Ian Moore, who we expect to compete a little bit with Philip Daniels at right tackle. And then Austin Siereveld, just with how thin this team is at offensive tackle, I mean, after the 2 transfers and more, your next guy is what? Deontay Armstrong? Like, it's kind of a mismatch. You have Carter Lowe coming in as a freshman. You need more depth at that position, and to build it and to get Austin some more reps there can be very valuable. But it's also just a procedural thing. You know, we kind of talked about that a little bit off the air of first day, they needed a body there. So in the bigger scope of things too, Ryan Day talked about in his press conference with the new 105-man roster limit, a lot of guys are going to be playing multiple positions. So a combination of different things that saw that, but still interesting to see Austin working at left tackle.
Yeah, I think we'd both be very surprised if Austin Siereveld was Ohio State's starting left tackle. But, I mean, just think back to last season. Think about who was the left tackle for the second half of the season. Donovan Jackson, who was Ohio State's left guard. And think about if he hadn't been able to make that transition, we would not be looking at a banner right behind us that says Ohio State 2024 national champions. And so it's a prudent move because of what we saw last year with Josh Simmons, Seth McLaughlin going down, the versatility that guys had to show for Ohio State to be cross-training their top offensive linemen between multiple positions. And Ryan Day said it's not going to be just Austin. He said Luke Montgomery is going to get some reps at center. Tegra Shabull is going to get some reps at tackle as well. Those 3 guys are competing for 2 starting guard spots. So for all of them to have flexibility to play another position is a big thing, because then if you do have an injury at tackle or you do have an injury to Carson Hinsman at center, then one of those guys could, most likely whichever one of those guys is not in the starting lineup is going to be your 6th best offensive lineman this year. So if that guy can move to, if you can basically realign it, if somebody goes down, one of those guys can step in at one position or another, that's a scenario that you'd like to be in if you're Ohio State. So it certainly makes sense to get all of those guys reps at multiple positions over the course of the spring. And we'll see how that continues to play out. I think beyond the practice field, probably my biggest takeaway from today was just how relaxed Ryan Day seemed at the podium. I mean, he admitted it. He was asked, he said, you seem more relaxed. And before the question was even complete, he said, I'm definitely more relaxed. And I think you can just see the weight that's off his shoulders. Now, it's March. It's not September. Will he be as loose when Ohio State's game week preparing to play Texas as he is on the first day of spring? No, but I think it was interesting. He was talking about taking his son on recruiting visits to other schools and have some of the conversations. He said he didn't actually watch the practices. I'm sure they probably didn't want him on there actually watching the practices. But he said, talking to the coaches after, and he kind of joked to him, but he said, second or third practice, you probably feel like you're not going to win a game this year. And one of the coaches said to him, I'm so glad you said that, because after today's practice, it felt like we're not going to win a game all year. And so I think certainly we only saw part of a practice. Today's practice wasn't perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect in the spring, but I think Ryan Day, really has that perspective now of seeing the way the team grew last year to know that this is a process. And I don't think his intensity is decreased at all. I don't think that his desire to go win another national championship has decreased at all. And I think, structurally things looked very similar today from what we've seen in past years being out here this spring. But it does feel like a burden has been lifted off of Ryan Day's shoulders to where, I think that loose Ryan Day that I think we saw from a coaching perspective in the CFP and led to Ohio State playing its best football of the season, you feel like that's going to be here to stay with Ryan Day, because he doesn't have reason to coach tightly, to coach nervously, because now he's got that national championship banner he can point to. He's proved he can win a national championship at Ohio State, and that's going to give him a lot of confidence going into what is now his 7th season as head coach?
Yep.
Am I doing the math right?
You got the math right on that one. I remember it because it's as many years as I've been covering the team. So it's interesting on that. But he you could just feel it in that press conference of how light it was, and it was cool to me how transparent he was about that fact. He said the words like, "I feel the pressure's been lifted." Coming in as a first-time head coach, you don't, at a program like this, you don't really feel proven in your process and proven in your approach to things and proven in terms of fan expectations until you win that first national title. And now that he has, it's just, like he said, proof of everything Ohio State's been doing under him. A huge burden lifted off the shoulders of his program to where now you can enter with this more relaxed feel and really address some of the things, because there's issues to address, there's questions to answer every single offseason. They have that here in Ohio State. And I had one more. Got to see if I do not have the note on me. One more, I wrote it down in my notes, and I just wanted to say it. It's not necessarily related to the Ryan Day conversation, but I just wrote in my notes today, Jeremiah yoked in all caps, because you talk about one of the things that just has always bewildered me with Jeremiah Smith, because we can't have a practice report without talking about Jeremiah Smith a little bit, is his approach in the weight room, his approach to the game, and his maturity, and just seeing him out here today, and you can tell he's packed on even more muscle mass this winter. Just looks shredded in the arms. It was impressive to see Jeremiah Smith out and running around again, and I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was funny. That was just 2 words in my notes.
Yeah, C.J. Donaldson also yoked. He's a guy who definitely stands out physically, the West Virginia running back transfer. Ethan Anion was certainly another guy who stands out physically. Ryan Day did said, they're wanting him to lose a little bit of weight. He was listed at 357. He didn't quite look 357 out here to me today, but I think he's certainly a guy who's in the process of losing some weight. They want him to not play at such a heavy weight because they want him to be able to move. They want him to be at his quickest. But I think those are 2 guys in terms of the transfers who really stood out physically, and even some of the freshmen too. A guy like Quincy Porter. Tavian St. Clair does not look like a freshman out there. Devin Sanchez does not look like a freshman out there. And Ryan Day said it. He feels like really that entire freshman class, physically, he feels like they could all play right now. Now, mentally, skill-based, learning the offense and defense, all those guys still have a long way to go. But you can certainly see it. 27 mid-year enrollees, a lot of new players on this team. Those guys, there's a lot of guys out there on this field today who technically should still be in high school, but they don't look like it.
Yeah, not at all. That was, I think, one of the other things, too, when you come out these spring practices and seeing the winter of workouts. And Quincy Porter was another one to me, like you said, that just, you don't see a lot of receivers that are 6'4", and he was kind of towering above the receivers and defensive backs that were around him. And it was very neat to see. But overall, just very excited to be back out here for spring football. It's only been a month, 2 months now since Ohio State's national title almost, but already started to miss football a little bit. So nice to get this little refresher today.
I'll be back for more on Wednesday. We'll have a afternoon edition of Real Pod Wednesdays coming your way on Wednesday after we come back here to watch a portion of Ohio State's second spring practice. We'll also be talking to Ohio State quarterbacks and running backs that day, so should be another insightful day here at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Wednesday. Lots more content to come over on 11warriors.com. We hope you keep up with us there. For now, Andy Anders, Dan Hope, this has been Press Coverage.